Welcome to the Phoenix Prosperity Podcast, where wealth meets legacy. Join your host, Tim Fergestad, as we explore the journeys of Phoenix's finest to success and beyond.
This is Tim Fergestad. Thank you for joining us. What does it take to close billion-dollar deals and lead global transformation? Well, today we're joined by Ali Faraj, executive leader, innovator, and expert at the intersection of AI and enterprise growth. Another tech expert on the show. Welcome to the show, Ali.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here, Tim.
All right, there's a lot of exciting stuff happening nowadays, and there's plenty to talk about. But first, why don't you give us a background on sort of how you got to where you're at?
Yeah, actually, interesting story though. I actually did not want to go into technology. I wanted to be a dentist, believe it or not. When I was younger, Tim, when you know how people ask you, what do you want to do when you grow up? I would say I wanted to be a dentist. My uncle was a dentist, and I wanted to be a dentist. I don't know why, but I ended up. I grew up kind of in a poorer part of Chicago. Immigrated to this country early on. I was young, didn't have a choice in that matter, right? But came on playing with my parents, but. Kind of grew up in a poor part of Chicago, didn't have much to do after I graduated high school, didn't have many options like we do today for a lot of kids, and decided the easy route is do what my brother did, go to the Marine Corps, right? So did that to get the GI
super
Bill.
Easy route.
Yeah, get the GI Bill, right? I figured, hey, that'll pay for school. Right? My parents couldn't afford to do that, so I'll do it that way. That was during Gulf War One.
Okay, that's a smart and tough play.
Yeah, that's right.
Just to make sure we're clear.
That's right. So during Gulf War One, joined the Marine Corps. Eventually got out and went to GI Bill. Went to University of Illinois Chicago and wanted to be a dentist, like I said. But by the time I graduated UIC, when I first joined UIC, there was 4 dental schools in Chicago, and by the time I graduated 4 years later, there was only 1 left, and so my options were very limited. They had closed 2 of them. I'm sorry, they had changed 2 of them to medical schools and closed 1, financial reasons, I guess. And so I didn't get in the first time I tried, and I was like, I got to make some money, right? So I pivoted. Technology was kind of coming up at that point. This is in the 90s, and .com came soon after that. And so I really pivoted quickly and loved IT and started getting some training and certifications, and never looked back. And so I've been blessed to have an amazing career, 27 plus years. I think we talked earlier on before you hit the record button that I've done technology from literally at the bottom stack to the cloud level, right? Worked in the data centers, helping build actual systems and servers, applications, software, cybersecurity, the whole gamut, right? So I'm one of the few out there that's been done it end to end. First half career is more on the corporate side, doing internal IT, and then last 17 years in what we call the IT services space, which is basically companies that actually provide IT services for very large enterprises. But I've been blessed to have an amazing career, primarily working with some incredible people.
Okay, excellent. And jumping to right now, right? There's a lot of new fields. AI. You've been all those pieces of paper on your walls. Testament to all the training you need to stay on top of this stuff. And
Yes.
What can you talk about? What are the most important ones that you're using right now? And then we talk about how that's impacting business.
Yeah, absolutely. So I in the industry we call it reskilling and upskilling, right? So these are key terms. So you have to always reskill your staff to keep them on top of the game, right? And also upskill, right? And training them for new technologies, new environments. That's always been sort of the play in technology. If you think of technology historically, every 2 to 3 years, we double our capacity. So if you think back, what happened 2 to 3 years ago versus today, the memories increased more than double, right? On your phones, et cetera. And that's generally how it's been run for the last few decades. Right. But so I'll tell you, the certifications for me in training, that's more of a standardized training. Think of anybody going to college, right? What did you learn in university? You learned baseline information. What you learned primarily in your career is on the job, right? So these are foundational trainings. And so, yes, I do have 13 certifications up there. A lot of them are on cybersecurity. I'm certified chief AI officer, one of the few in the world, as I mentioned, that has architected, productized, delivered AI products and solutions today that are in place today that are being leveraged by Fortune 500 companies. So that's a big one I'm leveraging. But primarily around cybersecurity, governance, risk management. Those are really the ones I use regularly. But that training is foundational. It's all about the sort of on-the-job experience. So for me, I'd much rather have someone with experience versus just paper training. The ideal scenario is you have both.
Sure. And it's changing so fast. You have to kind of do it on the job to stay up to date.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. And so you're seeing this incredible revolution, right? That's happening with artificial intelligence. But I'll be the first one to tell you, Tim, that AI is not new, right? AI has been around. I've been involved in artificial intelligence technologies for about 12 years myself. But the first first one who termed or coined artificial intelligence, I think back in the 50s, 1950s, right? And just to kind of ground everyone, this is sort of my recapitulation of the definition of what defines artificial intelligence, and that is at the fundamental level, it's a system or technology that is able to perform an action that you could not differentiate that from a human being, right? So think of what ChatGPT does, for example, today, and when you ask it a question or create a PowerPoint or whatever it is you're doing, generally a human being can do that and give you that information. If you talk to a professor or a PhD, right, whatever. But you wouldn't differentiate the difference between what they're giving you on ChatGPT, for example, versus what's happening in the system itself. So that's how you differentiate it or define AI. But to me, it's a core aspect of how you have to look at intelligence technologies and how to have to pivot in your career to make sure that you're still relevant.
Right. Okay. You mentioned a little bit of governance. You've done a lot of cybersecurity.
Yes.
How is that keeping pace with all the advances in AI and access and the agentic work that's going on right now?
Yeah, so we're always playing catch up in cybersecurity, right? For every door we close or every lock we create on a door, the bad actors come in and find a way around it, right? I'll tell you a quick story. I actually had been kicked out of a executive office before with a client, and the reason that happened is about 12 years ago. I was sitting with one of my clients, a CISO, Chief Information Security Officer. That's what CISO is, right? For a client, a major client. And he was telling me how they spent over $30 million in cybersecurity every single year and have all these technologies and solutions. And my view back then and still is today is that's all great, but you really have to take the position in addition to that you might be compromised today, right? So how do you defend against something, in other words, if you are compromised? And he didn't want to hear any of that. He spent so much money in cybersecurity. It's like, never
build a fence,
right?
Build a fence to keep the rabbit out, and the rabbit's already in the fence.
Right. So the idea is he's like, the rabbit will never get in the fence, right? I'm like, well, you can't really look at it that way. You have to also have other mechanisms. What happens to get in the fence? And he wanted nothing to do with it. So he kicked me out of the office, right? But I'll tell you, 8 years later, they got hacked. So I was right. So there you go. So the idea is that cybersecurity is a fundamental part of everything we do with daily life for us, right? Today, for us, for example, you have face identification, right? Multi-factor authentication, we're leveraging it today as users, but also on technology side, as technology expands and data expands, it's really difficult for us to secure those environments. So we take a sort of a multifaceted approach, defensive approach, offensive approach, and you also have to take that approach of, okay, what happens if I am compromised, and how to limit that threat, right? How to isolate the amount of compromised data. For example, think of a large library, right? If I am compromised, how do I limit that compromise just to one part of the library or one room? That way it's isolated versus getting the whole gamut of data.
Right. Then I've generally heard a rule of thumb of the more access points you have, right? Minimizing that, the more insecure you are. So you want to minimize that.
Yeah, but difficult with AI and data everywhere, and that's been the case. And you've got some gray hairs on your beard there, a little less hair than me on top. But I'll tell you, it's funny because in my world, and I'm sure other worlds as well, a decade or so ago, these big consulting companies, McKinsey and Bain, that come around and consult all these major corporations, they sing the same song to everyone. And the song at that time was, I'm sure you remember this, people, process, and technology are the resolution to every problem in the universe, right? These concentric circles, that's the answer to every problem, people, process, technology. And I would always look at that image and I would say, there's something missing. And I realized what it was about a decade ago. It's people, process, technology. At the heart of it is data. And so we're always creating data, right? Data is being created right now with this podcast, this recording. And so idea is, as you're creating data, how do you sort of, multifaceted, how do you actually take action on that data? How do you secure that data? How do you govern that data? How do you minimize risk on that data? That's a constant problem, especially with explosion of data.
So what do you see as one of the biggest hurdles right now in governance of AI?
The biggest hurdles is that no one's paying attention. Everybody's going so quickly, so fast that no one's slowing down to govern it, right? No one's slowing down. No one's really taking too much attention or paying too much attention to the fact of secure that environment, how to really put the controls around it. So what's happened is a lot of organizations, and I work with a lot of enterprises and larger type organizations, and all the executives I talk to, of course, artificial intelligence is part of every conversation, but most of them generally have no idea what they're doing. They're just following what somebody else said or somebody else did. They're just afraid to fall behind the competition. And so they're jumping sort of, the analogy I would tell you is they're taking their 2-year-old kid and they're throwing him at the deep end of the pool and they say, I wonder if he could swim. Well, that's a bit risky, right?
Yeah.
That's a big gammy, big risk you're taking there. And many will drown, unfortunately, right? So in terms of governance, in terms of managing risk, a lot of them are going so fast with head first into that pool, or throwing the kid head first in that pool, that they're not really slowing down to govern that data to put the controls around it to manage risk. That's one of the biggest issues I see today.
Okay. Let me give you a thought I'm having. You can weigh in on if it's legit or not. But a lot of people, for our listeners who may not know, AI is not just a large language model that you can ask questions in like Google and it gives you a summary answer, but you can set up integrations and connect it to different apps and it can actually take action on your behalf. That's the agentic aspect. And there are some, I have sensitive information, I have accounts, I have investors' information stuff. I have to make sure that's always separate and stuff. So I know what some people are doing is they're using several computers that are not connected, that don't have access to those folders or drives, et cetera. But even then, you're giving that control of your computer. It can see and go through all your files and click on things and rewrite things and rename things and send things through your email if you set it up to do so. To your other websites, it can navigate things on your behalf. It's really impressive and powerful. But it's supposedly getting the information from you of what to do. And one thing I saw recently was even an email that it's reading may have code hidden in it that makes it think you're telling it to do something. And so it's a next level of hijacking someone else's AI to do something and share information or and so forth. And that makes total sense. It wasn't on my radar, and it kind of blew my mind. I was like, oh boy. So I knew that there were risks, and it could, but that other people could so easily give it commands, and then it would think it was you. Seems so intuitive and obvious in retrospect. But is that actually a legitimate hacking that's going on right now, or a concern?
It's always a concern, right? I'll give you another analogy, right? So to simplify the matter, right? So if you think of today when people apply for jobs, a lot of the what they call talent access systems, TAS systems that the talent acquisition specialists use to process resumes, look for keywords. So some of people, a decade ago or so, got smart and said, hey, wait a minute. What if I take like 1,000 keywords and I make them in like 0.1 font, but I make it in white font and put it at the bottom of my resume. So you really don't know, unless you actually like highlighted it, you wouldn't know it's there. It's no different than that, right? So you're basically embedding into your resume all these keywords that would be picked up by the system automatically for the role, and whether you have the qualifications or not, right? That's the same sort of thing that's happening with your email example, which is you're basically adding code to that bottom of that email, but it's in white font against a white background. You can't see it, right? Unless you actually knew it was there and highlighted it, you wouldn't know it's there. So
but the computer reads it all.
Yeah, exactly. And what's happening is as soon as that's part of the system of any laptop or desktop or any software application is that as soon as you create data, it's indexed. It reads that information. You can search it. That's the whole idea of search, right? It's automatically picking up that information, that email or a document, and indexing it. So it's automatically picking up that information. You did not know it's there because you didn't look at the bottom of that email and didn't actually try to find it yourself. It's embedded in that email. So yes, that's part of the problem. There's also back-end embedding of data within emails itself. Cybersecurity, again, can be very complex. But keep in mind, most users are being compromised by malware. I mean, if you're a government official, if you're in some senior role, there's more active state-led type compromises, that are really funded heavily, that are more targeted towards individuals. But generally, for regular users, it's just malware that's kind of being put into your laptop and generally trying to get your bank information, et cetera, right? Unless you're a government official, you're not being generally actively pursued or targeted. That happens as well.
Right. Okay. So, what are sort of the roles you're helping people out with now? Right.
Yes.
I think you said you sometimes work in fractional roles for different companies. Can you
Absolutely. So I can tell you, there's a transformation happening, and I'm one of the few. I'll start off with this. I'm one of the few IT leaders, technology leaders, that in the world that'll tell you that over time, I truly believe that artificial intelligence will create more jobs than it eliminates. And there's a reason I tell you this, because today we're seeing a lot of companies saying they're laying off, Oracle laid off 30,000 people, right? Salesforce did a few thousand not too long ago, Microsoft, et cetera. You're hearing about all these layoffs and all attributed to artificial intelligence. That's really not the case. What's happening is being leveraged by a lot of these companies as sort of a the right sort of word, the word du jour, right, for their investors to hear that, oh yes, they're being very efficient because of artificial intelligence, right, and they're able to lay off 30,000 people at Oracle or whatever it is at any other company. So layoffs happen continuously because of business development, because of greed or whatever reason, right? Artificial intelligence is having an impact on productivity, but it's minor in nature. But generally, the reason I say that AI will create more jobs than it eliminates is because historically we've seen this, right? Before my time, I'm not sure how old you are, Tim, but before my time, I can tell you back in the 70s, if you looked at any video of an auto manufacturer, you saw literally hundreds, not thousands of people on an assembly line, right, creating vehicles in auto factories. And then robotics came up in the 70s and automated a lot of those jobs. Now, let's say that factory was able to produce 100 units a month with all those people. Robotics fast-tracked that. You went from 1,000 people in the factory to 100 in the factory because you had these machines building these cars. And we created 1,000 units a month versus 100 a month. But the tertiary impact of that is that we end up building a lot more highways. Those require jobs. Those highways got hotels and gas stations and mechanics, right?
Right.
So all these tertiary jobs were created. That was the 70s. In the 80s, something very similar happened. That's what I saw this myself, and I'm sure you did as well. An amazing technology called, I remember going to, for example, I'll give you, back in Chicago, my local savings and loan, which was near my house, was a massive building. You walked in, there was 20 tellers at a window, human beings, and then someone invented the ATM machine, the automated teller machine. I remember reading this article, it's still ingrained in my mind. Over 200,000 or 300,000, kind of the exact number, of tellers' jobs were eliminated because of ATMs. But you know what ended up happening, Tim? Went from massive banks with 20 tellers to micro banks, a bank at every corner, right? Someone has to build the ATM machine. Someone has to build the screen for ATM machine, the software, the security. Someone's got to install the ATM machine, right? Put money in the ATM machine. And then there's hundreds of thousands of ATM machines. And so, yes, those teller jobs were created, but over time, new jobs were created. And the same story continues back in the prevalence of the IT age. Right, .com and software. Microsoft came with Office. You could go back to historical videos of news articles and news programs telling you how thousands of jobs are going to be eliminated because of this technology, but thousands more were actually created in new ways. So it'll take some time, but AI will create more jobs. And back to your core question, what are those jobs? Those jobs are going to be jobs that actually really understand how to leverage artificial intelligence by programming it, by actually leveraging it for solutioning, by leveraging prompts accordingly. Very similar to today. There's Excel experts that know Excel a lot more than you and I do.
Right.
So there'll be a lot of new jobs that are created. Obviously, all the construction jobs with data centers, right? Those are all being created out there. So there's a lot of new jobs being created. What those will be in the future, we don't have a clear picture yet. But I do feel that in 5 or 7 more years from now, you're going to see a transformation of resources and capabilities to address those needs.
Okay. And with your insights on the future, how are you planning for it? And not just professionally, but also like with your retirement funds, and where
Yeah.
is sort of your energy put?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm, hopefully retire at some point, right? We'll see. Don't want to work forever, but for me, from a retirement perspective, I'm not a financial expert, but if I was gonna give some guidance here, I would say, look at where the money's being spent, right? Look at those infrastructure companies, electrical companies, right? That's what the future is. You're seeing a constraint today of a lot of companies, trying to build infrastructure around electric grids, around those construction companies, right? So something you wouldn't really see today. For the last 20 plus years, Tim, you're more an expert in this than I am. It's been the NASDAQ, right? It's been these high tech, companies, Nvidia, right? And Google, Meta, right? These are been the high flyers. And will they continue to do that? I don't know, but I can tell you the ones that are sort of the sleepers, the one no one pay attention to, the big construction companies that are building these data centers, the big electrical companies that are building electrical grids, right? All those massive plumbing companies, Carrier, right? The HVAC company that does commercial, all these data centers. I'll give you a quick nuance here, right? If you want to know where a data center is, 'cause a lot of data centers are actually meant to be. They don't put names on them. Didn't used to, because the whole idea is high security, right? And the reason you would know a data center existed is you'd find this gigantic building, and all you saw on top of it was AC units, because you have to cool those environments, right? That's how you know it's a data center. So think of those kinds of companies, right? The companies that are sort of, again, the sleepers that people don't really pay much attention to today, I think would be the high flyers of the future.
That's a good point. It reminds me of the old gold rush parable, whereas who made all the money in the gold rush was the guy selling all the shovels and picks.
That's right. That's right. Forget prospecting, right? Good to sell them what they need to build it on. So I think that's something that people need to look at. I don't know if they're going to make 30% a year growth. Again, I'm not a financial expert here, but if I was a betting man, I'd say that look at those kinds of companies, because that's what you're going to see today. The average build out time for a data center went from 2 to 4 years. Now it's like 4 to 8 years, and it might actually expand because of all the data centers being built out around the world, and because of the shortage of talent. A lot of people in my generation really went to college and began to focus on the services industry, like what we call the white collar jobs, right? But if you look at the future growth today, it's the plumbers, that are making amazing amount of money. The electricians are making great money, right? The carpenters are making great money. The masonry people are making great money. So, I tell you, I paid my plumber $250 an hour to put a water heater in, right? And he had so much business, he didn't need my business, right? So that's where the money's being spent.
The energy crisis is real. That's one of my hopes, though, is that the advances in AI can help with that, right? Maybe they'll finally figure out some better energy solutions, or they're getting more efficient with them already, but and they found different ways to cool them and so forth. There's more liquid cooling and other stuff, but cold fusion or something like that, and then boom, that changes everything, right? And that's my secret hope, is that those types of advantages will have huge impacts across the globe.
Yeah, we're making some headway there. Look, I'm not here to be political by any means, right? But I can tell you that our competitors globally around the world, China, I'm not going to talk about Russia because it's more isolated, but China for sure, and a lot of the European countries have taken on renewable energies, and why would you not, right? I think that if you look at that aspect of it, it's in a sense free energy. Again, I'm not here to get political for any reason, but I do think there's opportunity there. right? For example, I've got 2 Teslas out in my driveway, right? And I'm not paying for gas, right? I laugh at the gas station as I drive by. So I'm not a promoter of the CEO of that company by any means, but
And the
I'll
oil
take the
change
electric vehicle.
shop.
Yeah, I'll take the electric vehicle, right? I'll take the no oil changes. So, I think we should take every opportunity, in my opinion, to expand our resource capabilities, not to limit it in any way. So if renewable energies can accommodate for 10, 20, 30% capacity, if not more, why not? Why would we close that door, right? The more options, the better, in my opinion. And again, I'm not here to be political, just more of a, let's keep our options open and leverage every
Sure.
possible aspect of it.
Yep. Yeah, knowledge is power. We're recording this in April, and the Artemis 2 mission is out there going on the moon. I just read an article about how they plan on not just making like a Dyson swarm of launching chips that they manufacture on the moon, right? But also providing energy from space, which again, there's all sorts of future potential. So it's exciting stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you think of what the future looks like way beyond our time, for our next generation and generation beyond that, they're going to be on the moon, they're going to be on Mars, or wherever they end up. They're not going to take.
Yeah.
You're not going to take hundreds of millions of gallons of water with them to the moon.
Right.
That just doesn't make any sense, right? You got to make your own water, right? You got to make your own energy. So if
Right.
it's good enough for that, why is it good enough for us? So that's sort of the idea here. And you're starting to see
But
more of that.
data centers in space just makes sense.
I don't know about that one, but
It does. It's cheap deployment, and it's super energy solar, and it's cold. They don't have to cool them, and they're already up there connecting all of the internet anyway.
I'm more of let's put it in Montana and Wyoming. A lot of open land, nobody cares, and maybe the farmers care, but nobody cares, or the ranchers, let's say, not so much farmers. A lot of open land, pretty cold weather. Your issues, just get the pipes built to get the network out there. It's just the cost of putting anything in the moon or underwater. I know that Microsoft at some point was looking to build a data center underwater, which again, it's like it's going to leak. How are you going to service it? I mean, I don't know these ideas, man. Yeah, I don't know. Some of these ideas are like, I don't get it. Like the flying drones to deliver packages for Amazon sounds like wonderful until those things crash into walls or hit people or fall on somebody's head, and you get a lawsuit. Who knows? Paying a driver that is going to cost you that much.
Well, maybe for rural stuff.
Stuff. That's right.
Right.
Get it out there somewhere nowhere. That's right. I could see that. I could definitely see that.
All right. So Ali, as we sort of wrap things up here, I was wondering if you had anything exciting for 2026.
I will tell you that the one thing you can count on in 2026, the one constant you can count on, is change. That's the one constant you can count on, right? So for me, it's learn to pivot, educate yourself, upskill and reskill as much as possible. There are changes happening around you. Make yourself flexible. Make yourself available in terms of what you bring to the table in terms of your skill sets. Expand your horizons. The opportunities are there. Of course, there'll be some job losses, but in the end, I think again, my view and long-term view is there'll be more opportunities than that than there'll be less. So just learn how to pivot, learn how to really upskill and reskill yourself, and get yourself situated for the next 5 to 10 years.
All right. And in the interview with some wise words. Thank you, Ali.
Absolutely.
If people would like to connect with you and learn more what you're up to, where can they go? What should they do?
LinkedIn's a good way to get me. I'm not going to give up my email address, but LinkedIn's a great way to get me. It's Ali Faraj. I'm a tech entrepreneur out there. I think I changed my handle to the maestro of technology, so it should be easy to find, right? So, but yeah, reach out to me on LinkedIn.
All right. That's good. Thank you, everybody, for listening and watching. Thank you very much, Ali Faraj, for joining me today. Very much appreciate you sharing your insights and your story.
Thank you, Tim.
Inspired by our guests? Visit PhoenixProsperityPodcast.com/guest and join us on the show and share your success story with Tim. The spotlight awaits.